Hey guys, Miss Warren here. Today I'm going to be talking to y'all about the history of ceramics. So ceramics, when I use that term, I generally mean when mankind has made something out of clay, whether it's more practical use or a more artistic object. When I talk about ceramics, it's where you took a hunk of clay from the earth, you made something out of it, and then you superheated it so it became permanent. So clay is one of the oldest inventions or discoveries of human society. It was discovered all the way back in the Paleolithic area. This is before people as a whole settled down and started farming. This is back when people kind of wandered around and hunted and gathered food. So people used to think that clay first came around when we all kind of settled down and started farming, and we needed larger vessels to just store all of our crops in the Neolithic area. But they've been finding fragments of ceramic pieces that are much older than that, and that's kind of impressive. Some people have looked at the pieces of clay artwork and pottery that they've found, and they're dating it using scientific methods, and they're saying it might be as old as 20,000 years old, maybe more. And that's pretty impressive. Now, you have to think that some of these cultures that have disappeared off the face of the planet and don't have any writing or books or stories passed down to generations, all we have left of them are their stone carvings and their ceramic pieces, because that's a lot more permanent than paint or paper or clothing or any of the other things like that. So some of these really old cultures, that's really all we have left of them to figure out how they lived and where they came from. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at some of the oldest pottery I found. Now, there are some examples of, in Europe, they really started making small figurines out of clay. I don't have any examples of that today, but this is a small vessel in Japan in the, it's like a prehistoric Paleolithic era when people were still hunter and gatherers. These were cooking pots. So these are some of the earliest vessels made out of clay and ceramics. So they used to just kind of hand form these, like pinch them and form the clay with their hands until they got it about the shape that they wanted. Now, that kind of makes it difficult to make anything large. Now, as humanity started to settle down in groups, so the example of this pottery was actually found in Japan. Japan has some of the oldest known large pieces of ceramics that you can find. Now, shortly after this, here, let me go ahead and share my screen for this picture. Humanity, people as a general, kind of discovered this process called coil pots. It's where they took the clay, wet clay, and they rolled it out into a long snake, and they coiled it on top of itself, and they scored and slipped between the layers, and they smoothed out the inside in order to make a pot. Now, before, most cultures and societies, like in Mesopotamia, they would carve their pottery, their things to store their food in, out of large stones, and it would be pretty difficult and take a lot of time and work. Well, it was much quicker to make a pot out of clay using this coil method than it was to carve a pot out of stone. Now, you did have to be able to get it hot enough to fire the clay to where it became permanent. So this is an example of a coil pot. Now, you could smooth out the outside too if you wanted to, but I wanted y'all to see how you would coil it all up together. Okay. So let me go ahead and move on to the next thing. Now, so this is a kind of a long process. Shortly after this, in Mesopotamia, yet again, they invented, or at least we think that that's where it was first invented, a thing called a potter's wheel. Go ahead and share the picture of the potter's wheel for y'all. So this is a modern day hand kick potter, or like a foot kick potter's wheel. You can see at the top, there's a little circle, and at the bottom, there's a large circle. You would kick the bottom and the top would spin. Now, if you put your clay, like your lump of clay, exactly in the middle of this, and you kind of press it towards itself, the sides will be on either side with your hands. The sides will become even as you center it. Now you got to keep it spinning in the centrifugal force, and your hands running over the surface. It passes the clay through your hands, so the walls become even on every side. So you kind of make a little circle or mound with the clay, and then you get it about the height you want it, and then you stick your finger down in the middle and you pull towards yourself as it's spinning, and that passes all the clay through your fingers, so your walls will be even, and you kind of pull up to make the shape that you want. Now today we also have electric potter's wheels. It has a little gas pedal and it plugs into the wall, and you can kind of control how fast or slow it goes. But this was a foot kick, old school potter's wheel. Now we even have ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics showing us the potter's wheel. So here we have Kanan, I think is his name. Let me make sure. He's an Egyptian god of creation, and he has a goat's head. It's kind of hard to see him there. But if you look, the person in front of him is standing on his potter's wheel. The legend goes is that he made his children's on a potter's wheel out of clay and made them come to life. So you actually see documentation in ancient Egyptian cultures that they had the technology of a potter's wheel. Let me go ahead and out of that there. Now, another ancient form of using ceramics is making tiles, making flat pieces of clay and painting them different colors with different decorations, and normally putting them on floors and walls. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. This one is one of the gates of Babylon. The historical and biblical figure, King Nebuchadnezzar, this was one of the gates into his palace, and all those bricks on the outside are made out of clay, fired, and then put together in these designs and patterns. It's all the kinds of animals on the outside. So most of these tiles were also made out of ceramics. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Now, another really famous example of artwork that is made out of tile is that you often see in Islamic temples or in mosques. They have it, the walls are just absolutely covered floor to ceiling with very beautiful, intricate designs. And a lot of them are geometric and mathematically based. So let me go ahead and share my screen to an example of the tile on the wall in the mosque. So you see a lot of flowers, a lot of geometric shapes. Now, it's part of their religion not to depict a person's face, or not, especially not like a saint or an angel or a god or a prophet. They wouldn't want to depict a person. It's called aniconic when you're not supposed to draw people. Especially in their temples, it's much more common to see flowers and plants in geometric shapes and beautiful bright colors like this. So this is an example of Islamic tile art. All these tiles are made out of ceramics. So let me see if we can move on to the next one. Now, I kind of wanted to mention that ceramics is something that was discovered all over the world separately by all kinds of cultures. And although we kind of traded them back and forth and like kind of built techniques off of each other, everyone kind of developed their own style. So I'm going to show y'all an example so in Japan, they were some of the first people to discover ceramics. So here's a Japanese plate, and you can tell by the very simple fine lines and the painting that this is a Japanese style. The next one I'm going to share, which they discovered it around the same time, is a Korean piece. This is actually an incense burner. You can put incense on the inside, and since the clay's been high fired, it won't burn up the object. You can use it to burn incense. And you see a lot of little details on this, from the fancy outside leaf bits into like the sculptural little bits of the bunnies on the bottom. The glaze or the clay paint that's on the outside that makes it look glassy. In China, Korea, and Japan, they developed a lot of shades of blue in their glazes and greens that kind of resembled jade, common stone they would mine from the earth and carve into. I want to show you all an example of Chinese pottery here. So this is traditionally, you see this as china, like a lot of people say fine china. And that's because this type of porcelain, the really super white clay, is commonly mined in China. the clay with a high content of kaolin, which is the stuff that makes it white and glassy, was more often found in the land in China. And so that's where we get the term fine china. It's a type of porcelain that's mined there. Okay, so the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about is this. So independently, while in Asia and in the Middle East and in Europe, everyone was discovering clay and kind of figuring out how to use it. In the New World or the Americas, they never did discover the potter's wheel until the Europeans come over, but they did have clay. So let me go ahead and show you an example of a more sculptural piece. So this, they did an artwork, picture of a person out of clay. This looks like it's terracotta. And that's a lot of detail on there with that necklace and those beads and the facial features. They also did vessels as well to carry food and water, just like the other cultures. So here you have an example of, I believe that's a panther, but it's also a vessel that you can put liquid inside of. So the last one that I want to share y'all with, y'all remember at the beginning that I talked to y'all about sometimes all we have of a culture is their ceramics. Now, this culture, all we ever found of it was their ceramics and their metalworking. It's they named them the Nook culture out of Africa, kind of close to Nigeria. They were a couple of archaeologists were traveling through there, and one of the archaeologists found a fragment of ceramic pottery, and they're like, he realized how old it was, and so they started digging there and they uncovered these really amazing sculptures. Look at how kind of, I mean, it doesn't look like 100% exactly like a real human, but it's super expressive. You can see kind of like that they're looking forward in surprise. They look like they should be carrying something. This culture, they have no idea where they came from or where they went. They just found, once they started digging, a bunch of metal and ceramic sculptures out near Nigeria. And this is all they have left. So they've had to kind of piece together their artwork to see how they wore their hair, what type of clothes they wore, the weaponry they had, what kind of food they ate. And so from finding these artworks, they can get a good idea about how these people lived. So that's one of the interesting things about the history of ceramics, is that you get a lot of it, lasts so long. You get a sense of the culture by what they make and what they use it for. Okay, so I hope that that was informative and interesting for y'all. I wanted y'all to kind of get a global perspective of art around the world, and people are always making stuff with their hands. Now, I hope everyone learned something today, and I look forward to seeing your work in ceramics. I know I gave the alternate project for some of my students, if they weren't able to work in clay for whatever reason, that they could do a research project on their own. And I hope this kind of pointed you in the right direction, if that's what you're choosing, for what culture you'd kind of like to delve in and do more research on and look more in depth in. Thank you guys, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.